When it comes to weapons in D&D, not all of them were created equal, and many are considered to be mechanically subpar. On top of this, the rulebooks don't provide us much detail on these weapons, leaving us to fill in the gaps of how our weapons look and feel. Due to this lack of information, I'd like to go through and examine all the weapons of D&D to answer: what is this weapon, both in history and in D&D? How is it different from the other weapons available? And does it need to be made better, and how can we do so? For today's video, let's look at an iconic polearm of the Renaissance era, the halberd. The halberd is a two-handed polearm that was mainly used from the 13th to 16th centuries. Measuring 1.5 to 1.8 meters long, it combines the best parts of an axe and spear together. It consisted of a long wooden shaft with an axe blade at the end, topped with a piercing spike that varied in length. Much like the glaive, it would sometimes have a hook attached on the back for grappling mounted foes, though this wouldn't become standard on European halberds until the 15th century. At a quick glance, the halberd could be reasonably confused for a poleaxe, and the two were actually very similar. However, poleaxes had consistently smaller blades than halberds to better fight against armor, and while halberds were later made to be all one piece, poleaxes typically had a modular design. The first historical or archaeological evidence of a polearm resembling the halberd comes not from Europe, but from ancient China. The ji was a Chinese polearm that combined a spear with a dagger axe, a polearm with a perpendicular dagger attached to a long shaft. During the Zhou dynasty from 1046 to 256 BC, the ji gradually replaced dagger axes due to their dual use as a thrusting and swinging weapon, and were used by infantry and chariots well into the Warring States period. Over in Europe, variations of the words halberd began to appear in German manuscripts as early as the 13th century. Inexpensive to produce and versatile in battle, one of the earliest European records of the halberd was by the Swiss at the Battle of Morgarten in 1315. Still a newer weapon, it wasn't too distinct from other poleaxes, which were becoming more and more popular over time due to the need for weapons that could breach plate armor. As its use grew, however, the halberd became more refined, developing the spikes on the end and backside of the blade to better deal with opposing spears, pikes, and mounted knights. Its popularity peaked in the 14th and 15th centuries, when it became the primary weapon of early Swiss armies. During the Burgundian Wars of the 15th century, it's said that a Swiss peasant used a halberd to kill Charles the Bold during the Battle of Nancy in 1477, swiftly ending the war. After the 15th century, the halberd was still used by infantry, but the dominance of the pike saw many armies transition away from it as a primary weapon. The Swiss kept the halberd in infantry formations as a close combat weapon once pike formations clashed, using a mix of halberds, hand-and-a-half swords, and Swiss daggers in melee. When early firearms began to appear on the battlefield, many armies began switching their halberdiers to pikemen, in order to better defend the slow-loading arquebusers and musketeers from cavalry charges. While rarer to find on the battlefields of the 16th and mid-17th centuries, the halberd was still in use as an infrequent infantry weapon. The armies of the Catholic League, a coalition of Catholic states the Holy Roman Empire formed in 1609, had 7% of their infantry made up of halberdiers. In that same period, however, halberds transitioned from a primary weapon to a signal of rank, given to soldiers to denote their rank as sergeant. These sergeants could use the halberd as a melee weapon, but more often used it to dress the ranks of their men or adjust how high their pikes or muskets would be raised. As its status on the battlefield waned, the halberd remained a weapon for court bodyguards as well as a ceremonial weapon. The few halberds that were used by battlefield units were largely a symbol of rank and tool to form the lines, such as in the British Army, where sergeants carried the halberd until 1793 when it was replaced by the spontoon, a shorter pike used as a signaling weapon by officers. In China, during the Three Kingdoms period from 220 to 280 AD, halberds like the Ji were phased out as a primary polearm and replaced with the spear, though the Ji continued to be used for training purposes in Chinese martial arts. To this very day, the Pontifical Swiss Guard, responsible for guarding Vatican City and the Pope, continue to wield halberds as ceremonial weapons. Overall, though, while halberds remained in use far longer than other medieval weapons, it now serves as an icon of late medieval warfare that still pops up in modern media. In D&D, the halberd is defined as a poleaxe that resembles a cross between an axe and a spear. Measuring 1.8 to 2.4 meters long, they were extremely versatile against a wide range of opponents, due to their ability to use slashing, thrusting, tripping, or dismounting attacks. Present since 1st edition, the halberd of older editions cost between 9 and 25 gold pieces, weighed between 2.7 and 6.8 kilograms, and dealt 1d10 slashing or piercing damage. In 5th edition, the halberd costs 20 gold pieces, weighs 2.7 kilograms, deals 1d10 slashing damage, and has the heavy, reach, and two-handed weapon properties. When examined on its own, the halberd is an excellent reach weapon, offering good damage, an extended melee reach, and reasonable cost and weight, with the only downside being its lack of usability by small races. However, much like when I discussed the glaive a couple weeks ago, the halberd shares the exact same stats as the glaive, making it essentially redundant as a weapon option. Now, just like with the glaive, this doesn't make it bad per se. All the reach weapons we'll cover in 5th edition are very good weapons, and I regularly use them alongside feats like Sentinel and Polearm Master to infuriate my DMs. But with the stripped-down combat mechanics that 5th edition has, there are no real mechanical reasons to choose the halberd over the glaive. So, the halberd is a good polearm in D&D that has to share the spotlight with the glaive. For players who want to emulate a certain roleplay idea with their character without sacrificing their effectiveness in combat, this would theoretically be fine, as players can choose either the glaive or halberd and still perform exactly the same. However, I think that if different weapons are going to be available to choose in D&D, they should be distinct from one another, in order to provide players the chance to make meaningful choices in how they build their character. So, I want to look at whether we can differentiate the halberd from the glaive by giving it its own unique abilities or features. My first suggestion is to allow the halberd to swap between slashing and piercing damage types. Historically, the halberd's versatility between thrusting and slashing attacks was one of its main draws, so emulating that in the game's systems seems like a no-brainer. Much like how the halberd operated in 3rd edition, this would allow users to change their damage type to adapt to their enemies' vulnerabilities, resistances, or immunities, even in the midst of combat. The downside to this suggestion is that many 5th edition monsters don't come with vulnerabilities, resistances, and immunities. So DMs would have to tweak existing monsters to make choosing between damage types actually meaningful in the game. My second suggestion on how to differentiate the halberd from the glaive is to add a feature that makes it easier to trip a creature with the halberd. In 3rd edition, characters could attempt a trip action as an unarmed strike, or by using certain weapons like the halberd. In 5th edition, tripping a creature was largely replaced by the shove action, which allows you to push a creature either 5 feet away or push them prone, but this streamlined the mechanic to be very dumbed down. What I really want to do here is give the halberd a bonus to tripping creatures specifically, to emulate the halberd's historical usability to trip opponents or pole-mounted foes off their horse. To do this, I looked at the 1D&D Unearthed Arcana, where they added weapon masteries, which give certain classes additional ways to use a weapon. While not present on the halberd in the UA, the mastery property Topple perfectly encapsulates what I was thinking for the halberd. It states, if you hit a creature with this weapon, you can force the creature to make a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus the ability modifier you use to make the attack roll. On a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. Combined with the enhanced reach of the halberd, this gives it a greater utility role on the battlefield, making it easier to run away from enemies if they're hit prone, or to hit them with follow-up attacks. The main downside of this suggestion is that it once again steps on the toes of the Battlemaster fighter, who has the trip attack maneuver. However, the Battlemaster's maneuver uses a strength saving throw instead of a Constitution saving throw, and as the fighter, you get to add your superiority dice to the damage of the attack. So, even if this feature were added, the Battlemaster's trip attack maneuver would still be the better option, but the halberd would provide this utility to players who aren't playing a Battlemaster. My third and final suggestion on how to differentiate the halberd from the glaive is to add a special ready action. In 3rd edition, when wielding a halberd, a character had the ability to use a ready action to set their halberd against a charge, which was a special action that allowed a character to move up to twice their move speed and attack during the action. If a readied halberd struck a charging character, it would deal double damage with the attack. Just like when I brought this up for spears, this action not only fits into how halberds were historically braced against cavalry or infantry charges, but also adds a unique twist to the ready action. If we were to implement this into 5th edition, we could add a weapon property called Spear Wall, which states that when a character has a halberd equipped, they can use the ready action to set up a spear wall. When a creature enters the threatened area of a character using Spear Wall, the readied character can make an opportunity attack with their halberd. If the opportunity attack hits, you add 1 extra dice to the attack's damage against the target. While this property would conflict with some aspects of the polearm master feat, the proposed feature would cost an action to ready the spear wall and then a reaction to activate it, whereas polearm master automatically grants opportunity attacks without having to spend an action. So, this brings a fun but costly action option to the halberd, while not completely invalidating the benefits that polearm master brings. All in all, these are just a few of my own suggestions on how to fix the halberd. It's still a perfectly usable weapon, even if we throw all these suggestions in the trash. But it just doesn't have anything that makes it stand out, which to me is just boring. By adding in options that add more utility and adaptability to the halberd, we can transform it from a carbon copy reach polearm to a polearm that has a specific purpose on the battlefield. With that though, we come to the end of today's video on the halberd. A historic and iconic medieval weapon, the legacy of the halberd gets diminished in D&D by having it be an identical copy to the glaive. By adding some unique weapon features that give it more distinct roles in combat, we can make the halberd a flexible polearm that excels at bracing against a charge, then knocking opponents down before finishing them off, all while at an extra 10-foot range. However, what I want to know is, what do you think of the halberd? Do you think it should stay as it is now? Did you like some of the suggestions I put forward? Or did you have your own ideas to make the halberd a more unique weapon in D&D? You can let me know down in the comments, or you can discuss it on the Altroll Discord using the link in the description. If you want to support Altroll, you can visit our Ko-fi link in the description to leave a one-time or recurring donation. And make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified when our videos go live. However, that's all I had for you. Thank you all for watching, make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.